Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Took Compound V and Becomes Homelander Part 2. Before we start, please go support Guerrero Legends for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Deku is a male. Chapter 15. In the stadium infirmary, Is Death could be seen lying down with some bandages and band-aids, while next to her was Izuku, who looked serious, although in reality he was a little upset and worried about the blue-haired girl. After all, he asked her to be very careful with Momo, but as always she contradicts him just to annoy him, although this time things didn't turn out the way she wanted. Izuku, and I told you to be careful, but not like you always do, the opposite of what I say just to annoy me, I claim while looking into his eyes. Is Death, okay, I admit that this time things didn't go the way I wanted, she said, looking away, but in the end I won, right? Izuku, hardly. Young lady, he said through his teeth while pulling one of his Death's cheeks. At least she's glad that Karma took it upon herself to give you a little lesson. Is Death, you call that little one? She said, revealing the cut on her belly. Izuku, stop complaining, the nurse will come in while to heal your wounds. I have to go before my fight starts, he said, getting up from his place to leave. Is Death, hey, wait a moment. Izuku, sigh now what? Is Death, oh well, do you think that when this is over you and I can go out? She said tenderly and shyly. Izuku, you, the fearsome and sadistic lieutenant Is Death, asking me out? Is Death, don't misunderstand, I just want to get to know the city, and you should feel honored. Izuku, I rather feel cursed, he said in a whisper. Is Death, what did you say? Izuku, nothing. Is Death, I heard you say something. What was it? She said, standing up. Izuku, it was nothing, you're probably going crazier than you already are, he said, opening the door behind him. Is Death, cowardly Homelander, come back here and repeat it, she said, approaching him in a threatening manner. Izuku, I already told you no, he said, closing the door quickly when he left, but. Is Death, hi, she exclaimed, crossing the door with her sword near Izuku's face. Izuku, I didn't say anything, he said, watching as Is Death breathed the sword from the door. What's wrong with this woman? She really tried to kill me. Coming from you, I'm not surprised, said a voice behind the Patriot. Izuku turned around only to change his face from shock to one of disinterest and a little hatred when he saw that he had in front of him one of those he had previously considered a great rival and great friend. It was the same Todoroki that was in front of him. Izuku, what do you want? Hot ice cream? I asked, looking at the bicolor. Shoto, hot ice cream, that's a new one. Izuku, tell me what you want. Shoto, why did you leave Momo lying there? Izuku, I guess the real question would be why didn't you help her? She is your wife after all. Shoto, but she loves you. Doesn't she mean anything to you? Izuku, not really, not anymore, he said simply. Shoto, but why? Izuku, why did she end up killing the love I once felt for her, just like you killed all the respect I felt for you, he said, and then walked towards the arena until some words stopped him. Shoto, before you brought us peace, joy and hope, Izuku. Izuku, now I bring justice, he said, turning around staring at Todoroki. Shoto, justice is blind Midoriya, not ruthless. Izuku, you're right, justice is not ruthless, he said, making Shoto believe that he had reconsidered, but it is not treacherous either. After saying that, he decided to leave, leaving a sad and regretful Todoroki, who had not realized that the entire conversation had been heard by Is Death, who was stuck to the door to listen to everything, and by Mirio, who also wanted to talk to Izuku, but in the end he had to confirm it by listening to everything he had to say to Todoroki, and then leave. In the arena, everyone was eager to see the final match that would decide the winner of these fights, while Midnight was eagerly awaiting the next and final match of the day, as he knew very well who was going to participate, and wanted to see how much he had improved since the last time he saw him. Midnight, okay, it's time for us to start the last fight announcement. While the audience applauded for this fight, the screen will no longer be necessary since it is about the leader of the top heroes versus the leader of the heroes of the United States. Let's welcome our number one hero, Mirio Togata, he said while the aforementioned came out from under the arena. Midnight, and here is the representative of the United States, the one they say is the very embodiment of the American dream, Izuku Midoriya, he said as the aforementioned came out of the opposite entrance, revealing that he was wrapped in large, hard chains causing confusion in everyone. Eri, there is my dad, she said with her hand on her forehead. Why is it tied with chains that ships use to anchor? Eri, from the typical dramatic entrances, AI. In the arena. Izuku, you better give up and retreat, Togata, before it's too late, I suggested as he climbed into the arena. Mirio, I won't do it, Midoriya, my goal now is to defeat you. Izuku, sweetie, what makes you think he can beat me? He said / asked mockingly while standing in front of the symbol of peace. Mirio, I don't lose hope. Izuku, me either, he said after breaking his chains very easily and making his crimson eyes shine. Chapter 16. Izuku and Mirio stared at each other as they waited for midnight to give the signal to start the fight. The aforementioned raised her whip as she watched both opponents getting into an attack position, or else in that case it would be Mirio who began to emanate golden rays as he got into a fighting stance while Izuku stood still in his place, waiting for Mirio's move, who had his gaze fixed on him, analyzing him and thinking about what movements he would use. Midnight, okay, are you ready? She said / asked, looking at Mirio. Mirio, yes. Midnight, are you ready? She said, looking at Izuku, who just cracked his knuckles. Okay, start. After starting the fight, Mirio shot out against Izuku with the intention of giving him a powerful blow, but the blonde-haired boy, as if it were nothing, stopped trying to give him a strong blow, but the other blonde managed to dodge that blow with difficulty, seeing how a strong current of air came out directed at the wall, destroying it completely. Noticing that Izuku was not playing games, willing to finish him one way or another, so without further ado he moved away from the blonde American state, only to see that Izuku was in front of him with his fist a few centimeters from hitting him squarely in the face, so without further ado he blocked it with his arms in an X shape, receiving the blow. That made him retreat several meters to the edge of the arena, only to fall on his knees to the ground. Izuku, wow, I'm surprised you were able to block one of my blows like that, but you still have a long way to go before you can withstand it, he said as he watched Mirio breathing heavily. Mirio, damn, it's stronger than I thought, he said in a whisper as he began to get up. It seems that he is more than willing to kill me regardless of the consequences, he said, seeing how Izuku was still in place with his arms crossed. If I attack him head on, only death awaits me, so I have no choice but to fight with everything. After saying that, he used his quirk to enter the ground, confusing Izuku a little, but that confusion was left behind when he received a strong blow to the chin, sending him back a few centimeters. The former green-haired boy rewarded himself for that unexpected blow by seeing Mirio with half his body off the ground with his fist raised covered in rays, so without further ado he went to attack him, but Mirio went back into the ground, avoiding the blow, and then kicked, taking advantage of the fact that Izuku was floating to get him out of the sand, but the blonde-haired boy managed to stop at the edge of the sand. Izuku, not bad, he said as he walked away from the shore. But then Mirio grabbed him by both feet and then pulled him hard, burying Izuku and then starting to hit the hero of the United States without him having a chance to respond, until he stopped and stood in front of him while having a big smile on his face. Mirio, Izuku, please give up. You know very well that it is the right thing to do so that everything can go back to the way it was, he said while watching how the US hero remained motionless looking at the ground. If you give up, this will be yours again, he said, showing the one for all, only to hear a laugh from the former green-haired man. Izuku, ha ha ha, seriously, that's all the supposed symbol of peace can give? Don't buck with me, he said as he got out of the ground as if nothing happened. How disappointing. After saying that, he gave him a blow that made him step back, but the current bearer of one for all managed to recover before reaching the edge of the arena, only to wipe the blood coming out of his lip while staring at Izuku. Izuku, do you want to know the difference between you and us? He asked, receiving silence from Mirio. The difference is that we are not afraid to get our hands dirty for the good of others, while you are just clowns in ridiculous tights who only seek fame, he said, hurting the pride of the heroes of Japan. Mirio, you're going to eat those words, he said while golden rays surrounded him. Izuku, I want to see you try it. Both were staring at each other, causing an overly heavy and hostile atmosphere, waiting to see who of the two was going to be the first to make the first move. But then they saw Mirio launching himself into an attack against Izuku, who still remained motionless in his place. Mirio was a few centimeters away from connecting a blow, but before doing so he was sent flying by a counterattack from Izuku, sending him into the stands, but before hitting he received another blow from the former green-haired man who sent him to the sky and then appeared above him and kicked him in the stomach, sending him crashing into the arena. Niger. He's too fast, she said, surprised by Izuku's speed. Ryuko. And let's not leave out the tremendous strength he has. All Might. How is it possible that Midoriya Shonen has that strength and speed? Nizu. Without a doubt, young Midoriya has improved a lot in the time he has not been with us, he said, proud of Izuku's achievement. Aizawa. That's my offspring's spirit, he said with a slight smile. Izuku. It's useless, Mirio. You can't beat me, he said, seeing the aforementioned lying on the ground trying to get up. You better stay on the ground where you belong, he said, turning his back on him. Mirio. Damn you, you'll regret those words, he screamed as he proceeded to rush towards Izuku, who only sighed and then turned quickly and grabbed both of Mirio's hands and began to struggle with him until Mirio became intangible, going through Izuku and then hitting him in the back with One for All activated, sending him into the stands, but before touching them, Izuku managed to stop himself, staying headfirst, staring Mirio straight in the face and then returning to him, giving a series of blows to his stomach. Mirio tried to respond by hitting him with One for All activated, but Izuku managed to dodge it and then kick him in the nape of the neck, about to knock him out of the arena, but before doing so, he grabbed him by the cape, confusing everyone. Izuku, don't think I'm done with you, useless one, he said sinisterly, scaring Mirio. He began to spin, still holding Mirio, beginning to increase his speed more and more, making some people dizzy. The cape broke, causing Mirio to be shot into the sky, flying about 100 meters and then beginning to plummet without having the chance to stop his fall. Izuku remained in place, taking a breath of air to deliver the finishing blow, something that was noticed by Eri. Eri, quick everyone, cover your ears, alarmed everyone but only those from Night Raid, the Jigas, their friends, Endeavor, Aizawa, Nizu, Midnight, Mizjoke, Siko and Kami understood what was going to happen, doing what was lost. Izuku. Taking a breath, trash, he used his sonic scream when Mirio was just a few centimeters away from him, causing him to fall out of the arena with his eardrums shattered by the force of the scream while the spectators tried to recover from the shock they felt from the scream. Midnight. Mirio Togata is out of the arena. Izuku Midoriya is the winner announcement, while the aforementioned left the arena watching as the paramedics took Mirio away and received bad looks from some heroes for using that ability without warning, without knowing that something else was happening in the city without them realizing it. Chapter 17. 5 minutes before Izuku gave a brutal defeat to Mirio, the members of the League of Villains along with their 2 allies were waiting for the perfect moment to be able to start the distraction so that their other companions could successfully complete their missions, but there was one person who thought otherwise, and that was Himiko Toga, who had a bored look directed at the tournament as she waited for the distraction plan to be carried out so she could talk to the most special person for her. Twice. Okay, I'm already very nervous. 1. Calm down, crybaby. If everything goes well, your friends will end before the festival ends. 2. Also, there is nothing to worry about, we can handle it without any problem. Twice. I just hope we can save ourselves an unnecessary confrontation with him, he said before hearing Izuku being given victory at the festival. Why does misfortune haunt me? 1. Okay, Chan, time to work. You guys wait for our signal to get into action, said the smaller man as he climbed onto his partner's shoulder. Well, it's time for revenge, my friend. 2. Ha ha ha, it will definitely be fun, Choi, he said, coming out of the shadows revealing his identity. Chan. While at the festival, Izuku had his foot on Mirio's face as he mocked him. After all, this was a perfect opportunity to get a little retaliation against Japan's #1 hero. After all the things he said and did to him the day he was expelled from the old and forgotten UA Academy. Izuku, wow, what happened, Mirio-san? Aren't you supposed to be the symbol of peace and Japan's #1 hero? He said asked innocently while applying more force to his foot. Tell me, what happened with that arrogance of yours? All Might, enough, he shouted furiously, entering his muscular form, drawing everyone's attention. Izuku, ha ha ha, seriously, All Might, you decided to take away my hard-earned power from a poor devil who doesn't even know how to use it, he said mockingly as he looked at the former symbol of peace. Your predecessor would be very disappointed in you, pathetic excuse for a hero. Everyone was completely silent at what Izuku had just said, or rather, who he had said it to. All Might was quite furious at what Izuku said to the point of jumping into the arena and facing the former green-haired boy who remained in place, continuing to step on Mirio's car while keeping his mocking smile on All Might. All Might, I want you to take back your words. Izuku, why? Am I not telling the truth? I really don't understand what One for All saw in you to make your teacher choose you, he said, causing more anger in the former hero. Having more people more worthy of his power, he decided to choose a Quirkless without anything special. All Might, you are too, he said, trying to defend himself from the insult. Izuku, the difference is that I am not me. I do not ruin the lives of others and ridicule my predecessors with morals that I will not comply with, he said before stopping a blow as if nothing from All Might. I do not understand why you are angry if it is true, All Might. Now I understand why One for All is fading away. All Might, you're going to have that power whether you want it or not, he said while struggling with Izuku. The former green-haired boy was going to proceed to teach his former role model a lesson until he heard someone asking for help. So without further ado he proceeded to let him go, and leave quickly to get to where they were asking for help. All Might, damn coward, come back here. Mandalay, I don't think he left because he was a coward, All Might, she said, looking in one direction. All Might, that kid was a crybaby, and he still is, he said, very upset. Psycho, I hope you keep saying the same thing when you get back from doing your clown job, she said, watching as smoke came out of the city center, drawing everyone's attention. In the center of Mizurufu, Chang was causing great chaos, making several people run away, making a big grimace of malice, but it was not enough for him. He charged against a small cafeteria where there were people, but especially the mother of one of the greatest heroines of the top. In that place was Mikajiro, who was trying to help as many people as possible by getting them out of the place, but unfortunately she managed to get out, being buried by the rubble of the place. Chang, I wonder how much longer that guy is going to take? He wondered before seeing some rubble move, revealing Mika with blood coming out of her head. Well, look at the beauty we have here, he said, taking the woman by the neck with his hand. Mika, why are you doing this? I asked with difficulty due to the lack of air I was suffering. Chang, it's not personal, beautiful, it was just commissioned to me, he said, putting more strength in his grip, ready to kill the woman until someone stopped him. This was not part of Chang's plan, someone said seriously. Chang, what are you doing here? We haven't given the signal yet, he said, seeing that it was Toga, and twice I tried to stop her. Toga, you were only supposed to create enough chaos to call Izuku, not kill people, he said seriously. Chang, didn't you like murder? Toga was going to respond with a negative. After all, she had changed a long time ago, although she had to be careful so that no one suspected her. But before anything else happened, a loud bang was heard that caught the attention of the three. Chang, well, we're going to die now, he said calmly. Twice. How, and you say it so calmly? Chang, and how did you want me to say it? Twice. Well, with a little more emotion. Something like we're going to die, he began to explain, and then shouted the last part in a terrifying and dramatic way. But then the rumble was heard again, only for Toga and twice to feel a strong current of air hit them, and then see Chang fly against a gasoline truck which exploded on impact, and then thrown back to where he was previously, only to see America's #1 hero floating while holding Mika in his arms, who was breathing with some difficulty, ignoring them. Mika, thank you so much for saving me, she said as she snuggled into his chest. Izuku, you were brave, now it's my turn to end this, he said as he carefully laid her down on the floor. But then he felt the heat increased as well as the fire, so he turned around, seeing Chang coming out of the flames with a bruise on his cheek and blood coming out of his lip thanks to the blow he gave him. Izuku, it seems that prison hasn't changed you at all, Chang, he said as he advanced towards him, cracking his knuckles. Chang, I wouldn't say the same, Homelander, he said, launching himself at him, trying to crush him with his metal bag. Izuku proceeded to stop her with one hand, but was quite shocked as the force with which the blow was directed was more than he expected, forcing him to stop the blow with both hands in addition to making his feet touch the ground that cracked. Izuku, ha, there is definitely a big difference, he said, applying more force and pushing Chang, but my real question is, where is your friend Choi? After all, I thought you two were inseparable. Chang, and we are. After saying that, a quick figure emerged from the rubble proceeding to attack Izuku, who barely managed to dodge the attack, receiving a large scratch on the chest and then seeing how the culprit placed himself on Chang's shoulder. Choi, it's just like old times, Homelander, he said while showing his claws. You don't know how much we're going to enjoy this beautiful reunion with you. Izuku, I say the same thing too, he said while raising his guard, since he knew from his own experience that they were very dangerous when they were alone, and when they were together it was much worse, so he had to be very careful. A clash of power was about to happen at this moment where it would show a little of what Izuku could be capable of if he got serious during a fight. Chapter 18. The city center was now plunged into a deathly silence. The survivors of the attack who were previously running for their lives were now watching what could possibly be a great clash of powers as they faced America's #1 hero facing the one responsible for the damage around them. No one dared to say or do anything, not even Toga and Twice. Homelander, look Chang, I'm in a good mood today, so why don't we just skip this and you just give up? Chang, I have a better idea, he said, caressing his big ball. After saying that, he proceeded to give Izuku a strong blow, sending him against a building which he went through, and then fell, leaving a path of chaos at a distance of 3 blocks to end up crashing into a comic book store, and then leaving, revealing that nothing had happened to him, just to see how Chang walked towards him while spinning the iron ball. Izuku, I admit something, I was expecting that blow, but I didn't think it would be that strong, he said, rubbing his jaw. Chang, how about we continue playing? After saying that, he quickly headed to attack Izuku, trying to crush him with his iron bag, but Izuku managed to avoid it with one hand and then used his heat vision, sending Chang against a car, and then began to subdue him again with his heat vision, and then grabbed him by his clothes and took flight, starting to hit him, although Chang was not far behind, as he also did the same until Izuku threw him to the ground, creating a small crater. Izuku began to plummet, but before hitting Chang, he hit him with his ball, sending him far away and then getting up. Chang, Choi, it's time for you to take action, he said before receiving a strong blow that sent him crashing against the wall. With Choi, he was on top of a building watching the action, accompanied by Twice and Toga, who stared at the blonde-haired boy who was walking to where Chang was. Choi, okay, time to get into action. After saying that, he jumped off the building, followed by Toga, while Twice stayed there. Twice, well, I'll go down the fire stairs, he said, starting to go down the stairs. With Izuku, he hit Chang again, making him step back, but then he saw how 2 shadows were reflected on the ground above him, so he turned around, seeing that it was Choi and Toga. The latter threw multiple iron needles in Izuku's direction. He thought it wouldn't be a problem, so he put his arm out, receiving a couple of them, but he felt a slight burning pain upon impact, only to quickly step aside the others while Choi and Toga had fallen on their feet where he was. Izuku, every day you impress me more, Toga, he said, seeing how the needles that had hit his arm managed to tear his skin a little. Toga, you always have to be prepared to deal with your enemies, Izuku, he said while taking out a knife, time for the second attack. After saying that, he threw another wave of iron syringes at him that Izuku dodged, only to feel his chest being opened again, looking at Choi, who was smiling with blood on his claws. But when Izuku was going to crush him, a ball hit his face, making him back off, seeing that it was Chang, but before heading towards him, he received another blow, sending him flying. Izuku got up only to see that the cause was another Chang, and then he saw how several Changs began to appear around him, assuming it was Twice, so he began to look for him with his eyes, seeing that he was on a fire escape. Izuku, I wonder if this was planned or are they just winging it? But then all the Changs that were created by Twice began to attack Izuku, who tried to defend himself, managing to destroy several of them, but in the end he had ended up being subdued, being held by both arms and neck. The real Chang grabbed a car and threw it against Izuku, who was going to proceed to destroy it with heat vision until he saw how there was a family in there, so he freed one of his hands and held it, and then sent it flying into the sky, causing it to spin a couple of times and then fall on its 4 wheels. Chang, Toga and Choi launched themselves to attack Izuku to finish him off, while he remained motionless, being held by Chang's clones, but then his eyes glowed crimson. Twice, okay, this is going to get ugly, he said while getting safe from what could happen. At the festival, all the heroes who were there were discussing with Izuku's team about going to the place where the battle was taking place. Bakugo, we must go stop those villains. That extra Izuku will never be able to defeat them. It's death, please remain calm. Eri, Odo-san, sure you have everything under control. AI, Eri is right, we have to trust him. Leon, you see, even the little ones say it, surely Homelander has already solved it, and there will be no need to go, she said before hearing a loud bang, watching as a huge explosion formed at the site of the battle. Okay, we have to go, she said defeated, agreeing to go to the place. In battle, Chan had flown against a place which collapsed the moment his body hit it, while Choi was embedded in a wall, leaving only Toga, who looked at Izuku in front of her floating with his eyes shining crimson. She thought that Izuku was going to kill her, but she saw how the crimson glow was fading, revealing those light blue eyes that she loved more than the jade-colored ones, but in that she saw how a large portal opened above him. Toga, watch out. Izuku turned around quickly, only to be crushed by a large fist that buried him into the ground, the cause being Gigantomochi himself, the most loyal villain all for one. Chapter 19. Chan, Choi, and Twice saw how Gigantomochi had managed to crush Izuku as if it were nothing with his gigantic fist, smiling, while Toga just looked where Gigantomochi's fist was in shock, thinking that he had managed to kill Izuku with that great and powerful blow that took him by surprise. Choi and Twice had approached where Gigantomochi was while smiling despite the fact that they had managed to finish off Homelander. Chang, very well done, dwarves. With this he surely won't be a nuisance to our plans, he said, seeing Gigantomochi's fist embedded in the ground. But then they see the top heroes along with the US heroes, so they decided to stand on guard to start fighting, while Toga continued to see the place where Izuku's body was buried being crushed by more than 10 tons of pure muscle. All Might, League of Villains, this day is the last you will have on the streets, since we will take care of locking you in a cell where you deserve to be, he said while his body was enveloped by yellow rays. Chan, please brat, if you couldn't beat Homelander, what makes you think you can beat me? He said as he began to spin his big ball. Bakugo, don't compare us to that extra. Choi, that hysterical Chang is right, he said, making Bakugo give a superior smile. Comparing these poor scum with a true hero like Homelander is a great insult. Bakugo, now consider yourself dead, shorty, he said, trying to make the man explode with his claws. Choi, if I were you I wouldn't try to do something stupid, he said, standing face to face with Bakugo with his claws on his neck ready to slit his throat. Tatsumi, don't forget that we are here too, Choi, and we outnumber you, he said, placing the blade of his sword on Choi's neck. Chang, but we are stronger, and we have this big guy on our side, he said as Gigantomochi prepared to attack. But then everyone felt the whole place shake and the ground began to crack as they saw Gigantomochi began to exert force on his fist to the point of putting his other hand out to prevent what was happening. Chan, what the buck is going on? Gigantomochi, I think I failed to kill him with that punch, he said, trying to prevent his fist from staying embedded in the ground. Choi, don't let him get up, he said, watching as Gigantomochi's fist slowly rose from the ground. In that they see how the big guy's fist flies out of the ground, creating a curtain of dust that dissipated when Izuku left the ground at full speed, delivering a strong blow to Gigantomochi's jaw, knocking him down and leaving him knocked out. Everyone was shocked by such a display of power that Izuku had shown by knocking out Gigantomochi with a single punch, something that not even All Might or Mirio himself had managed to do. All Might, this is impossible, he said without believing what he just saw. Niger, Izuku knocked out a Gigantomochi, he said, the same as Mirio. Nobody knew what to say while Izuku's companions just smiled at what happened, trying to contain their laughter, while Izuku had a rather serious look on the blood-addicted blonde who was looking at him in astonishment, but then he moved at high speed, placing himself in front of her while tightly holding Bakugo's hand, which released small explosions. Bakugo, what do you think you're doing? I have tried to complain/ask. But then a powerful blow to his chest interrupted him, sending him flying against a building. A large curtain of smoke was created, which when it dissipated, Bakugo could be seen lying on the ground vomiting a large amount of blood. Izuku, I thought I was clear that you won't call me that anymore, he said, looking at a dying Bakugo. Chan, we must retreat, he said seriously. Twice. Kurogiri, get us out of here, he said to a communicator. In that a purple mist appears below the villains, sucking them, but before disappearing Toga managed to throw a knife at Izuku, which he blocked with his hand. digging into it to see that the knife had a small note on its blade, only to later see how the place where the villains were before there was no one anymore, so he decided to leave it aside and then remove the knife and see the note that was on it. Note: go to this place at 12 at night. I have something important to show you. That's what he said, plus he had an address of where he had to go, only to then raise his hand and stop one of All Might's punches as if it were nothing. Izuku, do you want to accompany your disciple to the hospital, weakling? He said, looking at an angry All Might. All Might, why did you let them go, Shonen? He asked, trying to hit Izuku with his other fist. Izuku, you know you've had enough of me, he said, holding the other fist and then headbutting him, breaking his nose and sending him flying. Todoroki, but you're supposed to come here to help us. Izuku, wrong, I came here to do the job. You can't, he said with his back to you. Why don't you help these two idiots? After all, I broke Bakugo's entire rib cage with a single blow. After saying that, all of Bakugo's classmates became alarmed and decided to go help him to take him quickly to a hospital, while Izuku and his classmates left the place, mostly to avoid more problems and also to avoid having to clean the whole place, although Izuku was still thinking about that note that Toga had left him. He was curious about what she had to show him, although part of him told him that he shouldn't get too confident. After all, it could be a trap, so thinking about what he should do. Chapter 20. Night had invaded the streets of Mizurufu approximately 3 hours and 58 minutes ago, giving way to the guards of this city to make their rounds, trying to keep the city and its civilians safe. But for now, we will focus on the top of the tallest buildings in the city, where Izuku could be seen standing on the edge of the building looking at the entire city, bringing back several memories. Without a doubt, he had changed in many ways since the last time he took a last look at his old home before leaving. Izuku, sigh, this place has definitely changed a lot, he said while crossing his arms. But then a shadow appeared from the darkness, slowly approaching Izuku while holding a knife ready to attack, without knowing that Izuku had already noticed his presence. So without further ado, he turns quickly, holding the wrist of the person where he had the knife and then holding it by the waist, and then at great speed putting the person against the wall while he held both of the person's hands. As abrupt as always, Izuku-in, it's obvious you haven't changed much, the person said flirtatiously. Izuku, why did you summon me here, Himiko Toga? I asked seriously to the person already identified as Toga. Toga, straight to the point as always, you don't know how much I miss you, he said while caressing her cheek. But how did you say straight to the point? After saying that, he proceeded to push Izuku a little and then make a signal with his hand. A young woman with long blonde hair and emerald eyes emerging from the darkness, who seemed a little nervous and anxious. Izuku, what does this mean, Toga? He said seriously. Toga, well, Izuku, let me introduce you to marry your daughter, she said as if nothing had happened, leaving Izuku shocked by what she said. Izuku, what did you just say? He said, unable to believe what Toga said. At Shoto Todoroki and Momo Yaorazu's house, you could see her resting in bed. After all, she was not fully recovered yet. After all, she still had wounds that were too deep that not even the best doctor could heal completely. She would have to be on bed rest for several days so that the wounds could heal. But nothing compared to the great emptiness she felt in her heart. When she woke up and they said that Izuku had worried more about his death than her, she felt a great pain in her chest, to the point that it felt like it was being torn away little by little. Momo, Izuku, you can't imagine how much I miss your warm company, she said as she proceeded to lie down on her bed. The only thing I want in this world is to be able to be by your side again. After saying that, she tried to fall asleep, but the pain and guilt wouldn't let her rest. Even though she was too tired, she couldn't sleep at all, feeling like what she wanted most was being taken away from her. Back with Izuku, he was sitting on a park bench next to Toga, full of bumps and red marks on her cheeks, while they watched Mary play in a sandbank, creating a castle like a little girl. Toga, it was really necessary for you to leave me like this, he said while rubbing his cheeks. Izuku, you hid this from me when I was still here in Japan, so if it was necessary, he said, pulling Toga's ear and then letting go. And how many more do I know? Toga, just twice. He was the one who helped me so that no one would find out about this, he said, looking at his daughter. Izuku, I guess he created a clone of you so that no one would suspect that you were starting to gain weight and have your cravings and bipolar attacks, he said, receiving a blow to the shoulder from Toga, although it was her who was hurt. Toga, At least you can pretend it hurts, he said, rubbing his hand. Izuku, I guess I should thank you, he said while watching his daughter finish creating the sand castle, and you've fed her well. She studied and has a career in mind. Toga, you care about her. At least you're a good father, he said as he placed his head on Izuku's shoulder, and now that you know. Izuku, it's better to keep it that way, he said, surprising her. After all, if we reveal it, we run a great risk with both the heroes and the villains. Toga, I understand, he said as he stood up. I think it would be better if we didn't go home. Izuku, let me take you, he said as he stood up. Toga, thank you very much, Izuku, he said, and then turned to look at his daughter. It's time to go home. Mary, I'm coming, Oka-san. Is Oto-san going to take us? Toga, of course, daughter, let's go, she said as she climbed onto Izuku's back. The little girl imitates her mother's action by jumping and clinging to Izuku's neck, making him carry her in her arms so that the blonde can proceed to take flight in an unknown direction, while moving away a little from the city. Chapter 21. Izuku was flying over the city with Toga and the young Mary. Seeing how there were some guards making their rounds taking care of the city, the young blonde was amazed at the views she had, while the former green-haired boy felt how Toga began to touch him everywhere, making him begin to feel uncomfortable and harassed. Something that was noticed by Toga, who had proceeded to bite his neck and lick it flirtatiously, causing Izuku to blush a little without Mary noticing what her mother was doing. Mary, that is a beautiful view, Oto-san, I love it, she said happily as she felt the wind hit her face. Izuku, I'm glad you like it, Mary, he said, stuttering, feeling Toga's hand touch and massage a certain part of his body. Toga, wow, Izuku-an, am I feeling you getting nervous? He said, licking his neck and squeezing the part of the body he was caressing, making the blonde moan. He spent the whole trip trying to endure Toga's caresses and provocations until they reached their destination, which was a small house on the outskirts of the city of Muzurifu, very well hidden among the trees. The former green-haired boy proceeded to descend, staying in front of the house, making the young Mary go inside, while Toga proceeded to get off Izuku's back to start walking in a sensual way, trying to make Izuku fall into temptation. Izuku, well, I think it would be better if he were already doing it. Mary, Oto-san, why don't you stay for dinner, please? She said, using the deadliest weapon of all, the eyes of a scolded puppy. Toga, come on, Izuku-an, it's a good way to start having a good relationship with your daughter, he said, adding fuel to the fire. Izuku, seeing that he had no more options, chose to give up and proceed to enter the house. Upon entering, he could see that it was very different from how it looked outside, since on the outside it looked like it was abandoned, but inside it also had a homely feel and was decorated with various pieces of furniture, paintings, etc. For a couple of hours he spent time with Mary, listening to her whole story, her tastes, what she liked to do in her free time, and he had also heard her say that she wanted to be a great heroine just like him. Something that took him by surprise, since he thought that Toga wanted him to follow in her footsteps, but in the end he discovered that she agreed with Mary's dream. Mary, Oto-san, yawn, I'm already sleepy, she said while trying to stay awake. Izuku, well, it's obvious that you're already sleepy, Mary. Look what time it is, he said, looking at a clock, noticing that it was already dawn. Go, I'll take you to your bed, he said, carrying her in his arms. Toga, in the meantime, I'll pour some tea for the two of us, Izuku-an. After saying that, he proceeded to enter the kitchen, while Izuku went to leave the young Mary in her room, where he proceeded to lay her down and cover her with a blanket with his image on it. That made him laugh a little, and then proceeded to kiss the little girl's forehead and leave the room. He wandered through the halls of the house, looking at various paintings and trophies that his daughter had obtained, until he reached the living room, where he proceeded to sit down, looking at a painting where Mary appeared with her mother in an amusement park. Of course, Toga was wearing a black jacket with a hat on so that no one would recognize her. Izuku, these will be the ones I can never get back, he said while continuing to look at the photo. Toga, but you can fix that now that you're here and you know it exists, Toga said, appearing in front of Izuku, leaving a tray with tea and cookies. Izuku, you're right. Now that I know it exists, my duty is to make up for my absence during these years. He couldn't finish because when he left the photo he saw Toga, who was wearing nothing but dark-colored panties. Toga, what's wrong? Did you see something you liked, Izuku-an? She said flirtatiously, highlighting her breasts. Izuku, I think it's better if I go now, he didn't finish as Toga sat on his legs while taking a knife and slowly passing it across his chest. Toga, you know that Izuku and I have been very lonely and empty since you left, and I think it is time for you to take responsibility with me for having left me during these long years. After saying that, he proceeded to cut Izuku's suit with a quick movement, revealing his worked body. And just as I feel you are more than willing to recommend all these years of loneliness to me, he said, feeling something big and hard brush against his intimacy. Lemon skipped. Toga, that was very intense, she said while lying on her stomach very tired. I had definitely forgotten how good this feels. Izuku, you're right, but he said in a whisper, only to proceed to grab Toga's buttocks and proceed to penetrate her anus, alarming Toga. Toga, Izuku-in, what do you think you're doing? She said nervously, watching as Izuku looked at her seriously but with a slight smile, only to feel how he grabbed her by the neck and brought her closer to him. Izuku, but I'm afraid we're not done yet, Toga, he said as he proceeded to move. You better be ready because I'm going to make sure I give Mary a little brother. Throughout the night, the clash of skin and Toga's moans could be heard without pause. During that time, the blonde felt the true pleasure that her lover gave her, who was willing to protect her and her daughter. Chapter 22. The morning was beginning to take over the city of Mythology, which was home to several of the top heroes, but for now we are going to focus on the outskirts of this, more specifically in the cabin of Toga and Mary, where the rays of the sun began to flood the homely atmosphere that felt throughout the place. But for now we will focus on a specific room which belonged to the villain, Himiko Toga, who was being accompanied by the one she considers the love of her life, Izuku Midoriya, aka Homelander, the #1 hero of the United States. At this moment we can see these two characters lying in the sadistic blonde's bed, sleeping peacefully after a crazy night/morning of action between them, until little by little the sun's rays began to enter through the room's window, hitting the blonde's face full on, who he began to wake up little by little. Feeling a little discomfort that lasted for a short time when some managed to adapt his sight, having Toga as the target of his sight. Izuku, without a doubt she has become more beautiful than the last day I saw her, he said, seeing the beautiful calm face of the blonde as well as having her hair loose, giving her a prettier appearance. But then he noticed how the blonde began to wake up little by little, revealing those beautiful eyes that he loves so much. Toga gave a sweet smile, and then proceeded to kiss the blonde with great passion, while she climbed on top of him. Toga, good morning, Izuku-in. How did you sleep? Izuku, with you by my side, he said while hugging her affectionately. I slept wonderfully. Toga, and tell me, don't you want to repeat what happened this morning? She said flirtatiously while moving her hips. Izuku, it's a very tempting offer, but unfortunately I have a lot of things to do, he said as he sat down face to face with her. Toga, please, even if it's quick, he said, trying to convince the blonde. Izuku, I'm sorry, Toga, but no means no, he said as he laid her down on the bed and proceeded to get up. Also remember that you destroyed my suit. Now I have to go to my apartment for another one. Toga just had a tender pout as she wanted to repeat what they had done earlier in the morning, but she just had to settle for watching her lover naked as he put on his boxers, which was the only piece of left clothing of him. But before she could say anything else, the door to her room opened, revealing that the one responsible for the interruption was Mary, who was still too sleepy to see what was happening. Mary, Oka-san, are you going to make breakfast already? She asked while rubbing her little eye. Toga, in a little while, daughter, just let me get changed and that's it, she said as she proceeded to look for clothes to put on. Mary, Oka-san yawned. For now I'll sleep a little longer, she said, leaving the room, leaving the couple alone. Izuku, he looks a lot like you, he said, remembering the times Toga acted the same way when they were young. Toga, and you too, Izuku-in, she said, hugging him from behind. Without a doubt, she looks more like you than me. Izuku, so why do you say that? Toga, because she, like you, has this great idea of helping those who need it no matter what, she said while pressing her forehead against his back. Without a doubt, you have given me the greatest gift a woman could wish for. Izuku, ha ha ha, I'm glad to hear it, he said while looking at her with a smile that changes to a look of sadness. I just hope I can make up for all these years that I was absent in her life. Toga just kept hugging him in a loving and warm way, trying to calm the former green-haired boy's emotions that since he returned to Japan were overflowing to the point that he didn't know how to act. Meanwhile, At the League of Villains base, a meeting was taking place between All for One and his league with the mysterious man along with his allies. One would think that it was a normal meeting, but nope. If one were to pay close attention, one could feel an overly cold and hostile atmosphere. All for One, you had promised me that you were going to get that damn bastard out of my way, he said, annoyed, while several rays surrounded his body. And that's what All for One is going to be like. All for One, then tell me, why didn't your subordinates manage to finish him off? Choi, first of all, we are not subordinate to anyone. Chang, we're only agreeing to this so we can settle scores with Homelander. Besides, they are not part of my plan to finish off that guy once and for all, said the mysterious man while one of his eyes glowed blood red. All for One, so? 2. It's my creation, All for One, said another voice, bursting into the meeting. Everyone headed to the place where the voice was coming from, seeing that it was Overhauled, who looked a little tired but also anxious. Overhauled, have you finished what I asked you to do? I asked seriously while looking at the aforementioned. Overhauled, almost there. It'll take me longer than usual to finish the last touches, but that's it, he said seriously while wiping his hands with a rag. Mr. Compress, what are you talking about? Follow me, he said as he proceeded to leave the meeting room. The entire League of Villains proceeded to follow Chang, Choi, and Overhauled to the latter's workplace. Upon arriving, they could see that there were many creation chambers with all kinds of gnomes and other things, but what caught their attention the most was a thing that was lying on a table covered by a blanket. Twice. And what is that? I asked, pointing at the object. Overhauled. This is my latest and greatest creation, he said as he ran his hand over the blanket covering her. Note: before the meeting, Twice made a clone of Toga so as not to raise suspicions about their secret. Toga, see, yes, but what is that thing? Overhauled. Something that will give us the advantage over Homelander. But I thought it was already over. Overhauled. The body itself and the quirk aggregation they managed to obtain are already ready. The only thing I need is the system that allows me to maintain control over it, and that's it, he said while showing a microchip. Haha, with this our victory will be more than assured. All for One. After all, there are times when it is better to face fire with fire. I understand, he said while looking at the strange object, and tell me what Overhauled calls it. Overhauled. I call him Amazo, he said, revealing the name of his creation. Homelander's end is very close, and when that happens, nothing and no one will be able to stop the dawn of a new world. A new threat is about to arrive, one that only Homelander can stop, a threat that will test his limits. Chapter 23. Izuku was flying over the city of Mythology just to make sure nothing was out of the ordinary, if not to say that seeing each villain attack each part of the city every 5 minutes is normal, but then a loud bang and a large curtain of dust appeared not far from him. Seeing that it was the park where his date with Momo had been the day he proposed to her. Izuku, of all places, it had to be that one, he said as he proceeded to head to that place. In the area, what was once a beautiful green park with beautiful little lakes and rivers running through the place was now a battlefield where you could see a few gnomes accompanied by a gigantic being in the shape of a deformed dragon facing Ryuko in her dragon form, which was accompanied by Aizawa and Endeavor, who looked exhausted, while Hawks and Mandalay tried to evacuate as quickly as possible the citizens who were trapped in the middle of the fight. Villain, and your heroes were supposed to be very strong, but look now, ha ha ha, you can't even defend yourselves from us, he said as he proceeded to catch Ryuko with his claws and subdued her. Ryuko, damn you, you're not going to get away with this, she exclaimed, trying to free herself. Villain, stop fighting, heroine Ryuko. Can't you see that you've already lost? Ryuko turned her gaze to where her companions were, seeing that Endeavor and Aizawa were having trouble dealing with the gnomes, while Hawks flew in circles entertaining another group of gnomes, while Mandalay was in charge of freeing a family that was trapped by the branches of a tree that had been knocked down nearby. Ryuko put more strength into her legs and managed to free herself from the villain's grip, and then spit out a large flame, hitting him squarely, making him retreat. Villain, good attack, heroine Ryuko, he said while with one of his claws he took a bus. Let's see how you react. After saying that, he threw the bus with force, but Ryuko managed to dodge it. Ryuko, you failed. Villain, and who said he was targeting you? After hearing that, Ryuko turned around, seeing how the bus was about to hit Mandalay, who had managed to get the family out holding her daughter in her arms. Mandalay turned around seeing the bus about to crash into her and the little girl. Everyone saw that in slow motion the bus was just a few centimeters from colliding with the little girl and Mandalay, who was ready to take the impact, fully covering the little girl with her body, but then a loud bang was heard just as everyone felt a strong blizzard hit them, only to then see a red/blue blur speed past Mandalay to stop the bus. That's when everyone saw him. America's #1 hero. Mandalay, Izuku, he said, looking at the blonde. Izuku began to descend, getting off the bus and then turning to see the villain and the Nomus, who had already managed to subdue Endeavor, and Aizawa, who smiled when they saw the blonde, who didn't seem all happy to see what was happening. Villain: wow, so this is the #1 hero of the USA. I thought you would be taller, he said, approaching Izuku, who didn't flinch one bit, and I thought you were going to be a little more scary like in the rumors. As I see, you are not that big a deal. Izuku just stared at him for a few moments, and then turned his gaze to Izada and Endeavor as if waiting for permission to attack without any restraint, something they allowed. Endeavor, kick Midoriya's ass. After saying those words, Homelander rammed the dragon, both of them shooting off a building near the park, which they went through. Izuku lifted the villain and threw him hard against the roof, causing him to go through it and fall with great brutality to the ground, creating a mini crater. The villain tried to get up, but as soon as the dust cleared, he could be seen in very bad condition, as he had blood all over his body and several scales lying on the floor. Izuku, now you're convinced that the rumors fall far short of what I can do, he said while floating in front of him with his arms crossed. It was barely 2 hits, and you were already destroyed. So do you still want to continue with this? Villain, I think you're forgetting something. Hero. After saying that, Izuku was rammed by a dark blur, causing both of them to go through a building to the next street, where Izuku managed to stop the blur, seeing that it was a Nomus from Altagama, which was very strong. The creature proceeded to hit Izuku multiple times in his abdomen, barely managing to move him, but from then on he did not achieve anything, since it seemed to not affect the blonde, who decided to stop the Nomus's blow, and then tear off his arm and proceed to hit him with it multiple times until it was deformed. But in that he received a blow to the face, turning to where it came from, seeing another Nomus which seemed to have cannons on its arms, implying that it shoots energy projectiles. Izuku proceeded to approach where the Nomus was, which proceeded to fire multiple energy projectiles without any pause, trying to stop Izuku, who used his speed to be face to face with the Nomus, taking both cannons and tearing it off, and then piercing his chest with his hand, raising it, staring at him. Izuku, and I used to think they were a real threat, he said, belittling the creation of the Nomus. But then he sees how the other 3 Nomus that accompanied the villain approached him to kill him, so Izuku threw his partner at them with such force that he sent them flying to different parts, all turned to pieces. And then he turned his gaze to the villain, who was more than scared to death when he saw how easily Izuku managed to defeat those Nomus from Altagama. Izuku, right now I'm not in a very good mood. After all, you made me come to a place that brings back a very bad memory, he said, floating in front of the villain, while his eyes glowed a crimson red. Villain, well, I think I lost, so take me to the authorities and let's get this over with. Izuku, I'm sorry, but the only place I'm taking you is the morgue, he said, ready to disintegrate him. Villain, hey wait, that's not how the rules go, he said, terrified of what could happen. Izuku, the rules change, my friend. The former green-haired man was going to proceed to use his heat vision, but then Mandalay stood between him and the villain, preventing Izuku from ending this once and for all. Izuku, get out of the way, Mandalay, he said seriously. Mandalay, no Izuku, this is not how we do things. Izuku, well, too bad for you, now that's it. Mandalay, please Izuku, don't do this. I know what you went through, but killing every villain that crosses your path won't bring your mother back, she said, making Izuku stay silent for a few moments. Everyone was paying attention to what could happen now, imagining Mandalay being killed by the blonde just like the villain, but they only saw how Izuku took flight to disappear into the sky and then heard a loud bang, implying that he had left to continue with his work, while Mandalay looked at the blue sky, thinking about him and the pain she is carrying in her heart. Chapter 24. It's been several weeks since Izuku and his companions' night raid and the Jigers arrived in Muzutafa/Japan to fix the mess that the Japanese heroes can't confront. Since then the villains have not gone out much to the streets for fear of running into Izuku aka Homelander, since they knew that facing him was certain death, or something much worse, but that most villains or criminals decided not to go out to the streets anymore and do whatever they wanted did not mean that there were no problems that our hero and his group had to solve, since despite that they still had to deal with Nomus of Altagama accompanied by one or another villain with excess confidence. But today was different, since now there was no Nomus or a villain who wanted to do their thing, and that was taken advantage of by our heroes, who decided to take a little break to replenish some of their energy samples that the masterminds of the group were in charge of looking for the place where the Nomus of Altagama were generated in order to put an end to these conflicts with those unstoppable creatures created by All for One, whom they also longed to finish off as soon as possible, especially our protagonist, who wanted to make him feel firsthand what his beloved mother suffered multiplied by 1,000. But now there is nothing left but to wait until they find his whereabouts. Right now the group could be seen gathered in a house of considerable size where they were staying while they resolved the matter of the League. Some lived together with each other and others kept to their affairs in order to entertain themselves for a while and not get bored on such a boring and hot day like that. But right now we are going to focus on a specific room in which our protagonist was on the balcony staring at the city of Muzurifu, waiting for a reason, even if it was minimal, to go out and fly in that direction, since he almost did not like to be in the same place for a long time. Several questions went through his head until he heard the door to his room open, interrupting his thoughts, and turning to see the cause, meeting one of his daughter's friends. "Izuku, Aoi, what can I help you with?" he said / asked, seeing how nervous the young woman was. "AI, Mr. Midoriya, I need you to help me with something," he said while showing his nervousness. "Izuku, it's fine with me, but what is this favor about?" "AI, well, what happens is that," so he proceeded to tell her what was happening while remembering what happened a few minutes ago. Flashback: a few minutes earlier, in a room right next to Izuku's were Eri, Rika, Momo, Nairu and AI playing Truth or Dare until it was Rika's turn to ask AI what she wanted. "Rika, alright AI, it's your turn. Truth or Dare?" AI, challenge. He thought about it for a moment until he decided to give his answer. "Rika, okay, what would be good for you?" she said / asked, trying to think of a really good challenge for her friend until something came to mind. "You've already been challenged to go to Tatsumi and steal a kiss from him," she said while blowing kisses to her friend, who was bright red in embarrassment. "AI, I don't want that challenge, give me another one please," she said, covering her face with her hands. "Rika, I'm sorry but no, you've already passed several challenges, now you're completing it." "Momo, you know I don't like to be on Rika's side, but this time I support her." "Nairu, me too." "AI, but what will happen to that girl called Akame? She might kill me as soon as I try to get close to Tatsumi." "Eri, but why don't you ask my dad for help with that?" "Rika, there it is, after all it can distract her while you complete the challenge," she said while gently patting her on the head. "AI, with friends like you, why do I need enemies?" she said, making Eri, Nairu, Momo and Rika laugh. End flashback. "AI, and that's all," I finished explaining while playing with my fingers. "Izuku, there are these kids nowadays," he said while rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Okay, I'll help you, but I'm only doing it for the simple fact of not bearing the guilt when Akame tears you apart alive," he said, leaving the room, leaving AI, who looked completely pale. "AI, help me," he said to the nothingness, begging for help for the problem he was going to have with the brunette. Elsewhere, in an abandoned factory not far from the city of Muzurifu, several villains could be seen gathering. But for now we will focus on the interior of this one, where several test tubes could be seen which contained a large amount of Nomus, and in the middle of them Overhauled could be seen, who was still working on his creation until All for One arrived. "All for One, Overhauled, the Amazo project, is it finished yet?" "Overhauled, I still need a few adjustments, All for One. After all, I don't want to make the same stupidity as you," he said, bothering All for One. "After all, you already knew firsthand what Midoriya is capable of doing with his new powers. It's better to prepare Amazo as best as possible so that there isn't as much risk." "In that Overhauled is right, All for One," said the mysterious man appearing next to him. "We warned you about Homelander's new powers and abilities and you still didn't care. I hope that with that beating he gave you you'll learn to be a strategist instead of throwing yourself into being an idiot." "Overhauled, but the Altagama Nomus project is almost complete. We just need to wake them up so we can begin the attack. All for one. But Homelander and his companions will finish them off quite easily, won't they? Of course they will. But it will give us enough time to move the necessary equipment somewhere else. After all, this place is starting to become unsafe, he said, watching as Overhauled finished entering some data into the computer, filling the test tubes with a blue liquid. Overhauled, your previous scientist's formula was good, all for one, but thanks to my intellect I was able to improve it. Now it will be very difficult to take down even one. All for one, ha 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 ha, I like that. Okay, prepare everything necessary for the evacuation. As soon as the Nomus attack, we're leaving here. So the three of them proceeded to continue with their things while the test tubes finished filling completely with Overhauled's new formula, finishing feeding and reanimating the Nomus, which were going to be much more powerful than those of Altegama, with the sole intention of unleashing a war in the streets of Muzurifu. Chapter 25. The day went by normally until nightfall without any news in the city. Everything was finally peaceful and quiet thanks to Izuku and his companions, although of course in a certain house things were not going so calmly. Let's say which is Izuku's temporary home, and you will surely wonder why in that place things were not as calm as in the rest of the city. Well, the thing is... Akame, stop there, you damn blue-haired dwarf, or I swear it's going to be much worse for you, was the scream that was heard from Akame, who seemed very upset. The whole place was a mess. The furniture all cut in half, and you could see how the walls were full of cuts, while Akame was seen with her katana in hand chasing a terrified AI who threw all kinds of things she could find at her in order to slow down the brunette with crimson eyes a little. Although the truth is that throwing things at her to stop her didn't work at all. But to know why Akame was chasing AI with murderous intentions, it's better to go back a couple of hours so you can understand. Midoriya's temporary residence, 1600 hours HRS. Everything was really calm, everyone with their respective things and affairs. After all, that day was a really calm one without any sign of any villain who wanted to get too smart and do his stupid things. But then Izuku alias Homelander appeared, the #1 hero of the United States. He was looking with his eyes for a specific person until he finally managed to see her, noticing that she was polishing her katana, so he proceeded to approach her. Izuku, young Akame, he said, drawing the attention of the brunette. Akame, what can I offer you, Mr. Homelander? She said respectfully as she stopped polishing her katana and bowed. Izuku, I need you to accompany me to fly over the city to verify that everything is calm. Akame, understood, Mr. Homelander. Izuku, and please call me Izuku. Yes, I'm still young enough for them to call me sir, he said, proceeding to leave with the brunette, but not before giving a signal to the blue-haired girl who was hiding behind a wall to do her thing. The moment I left, the brunette and the blonde-haired boy, AI, proceeded to come out of her hiding place to approach Tatsumi, who was having some coffee with his friends. So without further ado, she adjusted her clothes and her hair a little and then began to approach little by little. Her nerves were noticeable, as well as a slight blush on her cheeks as she began to stagger little by little. AI, come on AI, you can do it. Just one kiss on the cheek and the challenge is complete, she said, proceeding to stand next to Tatsumi without him noticing. Okay, now I'll just kiss him, she said as she proceeded to try to plant a kiss on his cheek without knowing that things weren't going to go the way she wanted. Lubbock, hey girl, what are you trying to do? He said/asked, making everyone turn in AI's direction, even Tatsumi. But the moment Tatsumi turned around, he felt the blue-haired girl's lips collide with his, causing him to blush, while AI, upon feeling Tatsumi's lips, suddenly opened her eyes, feeling her whole face burn with embarrassment, and the others, seeing that, had different reactions like Nagenda, is death. Leon and Bullet only smiled mockingly, as well as holding back the urge to laugh. Lubbock just stared dead at Tatsumi while the others were in shock. Tatsumi and AI didn't know what to do. Their minds had literally gone blank until little by little they began to separate, staring into each other's eyes without knowing what to say or think, until out of nowhere they began to feel an enormous killer instinct that terrified everyone, thus turning little by little to where it came from. Seeing that it was Akame, who was surrounded by a black aura with purple touches, who clenched her fists with great strength, and behind her was Izuku, who was more than ready to fly out of the place in case the young black-haired woman decided to direct all her anger at him. But instead, Akame, now you're dead, damn brat, she screamed, full of anger, throwing herself at AI, who started running for her life. Present, Now Akane could be seen holding AI by the neck with her arm while in her other hand she had her katana raised ready to kill her if it weren't for the fact that Izuku, Lubbock, Susanoo, Bullet held her tightly while Najenda, Leon, Chelsea, Mine and Shield tried to make her loosen the grip she had on poor AI. Plus the Jiggers just stood there watching the situation without saying anything since unlike Night Raid and Izuku, they did value their lives enough to waste them trying to stop Akane. Izuku, Akane, calm down please, he said, managing to take the katana away from her but still seeing how the young brunette still had intentions of killing AI even with her own hands. Najenda, let her go, Akane, that's an order, she exclaimed, trying to break the lock that AI had imprisoned. But at that moment a tremor was felt throughout the city in addition to hearing a powerful explosion that released a shockwave that shattered all glass within reach and hit Izuku and his team hard. They without further ado left their homes, seeing how a large part of the city was engulfed in flames which was expanding little by little, while the cries for help from civilians and several roars were heard. So without further ado Izuku took flight to that area of the city at full speed while being followed by the Jiggers and the Night Raid, leaving Eri and his friends in the care of Bullet in case some villains wanted to take advantage of that surprise attack to do their thing in the rest of the city. Chapter 26. In the destroyed part of Mythology City, many civilians could be seen running for their lives as several heroes came to the place to protect them, but the most chilling thing of all was that the streets were stained with blood and corpses of several heroes who fell before the strength and ferocity of the attackers, which were the Nomas. But these Nomas were not like the ones before. These were bigger, more powerful, darker, and instead of being black they were dark gray. Empty lady. It can't be. How is it possible that these things are more powerful? She exclaimed, crushing a few with her fists, but her wounds were very noticeable. Endeavor, burn in hell, damn beast, he exclaimed as he released a large flame of fire, disintegrating a few until he was hit and sent flying. Gran Torino, pay more attention to your surroundings, Endeavor, he said while dodging the attacks of several Nomas that he had surrounded him thanks to his great speed. Mirio, how is it possible that these things are more powerful than before? He said, giving a blow with one for all at a low percentage so as not to break his bones. 25%. Niger, we have to keep resisting, at least until the civilians are safe, he said while floating and using his quirk to make them back off. Mirko, damn, I'm fed up with this stuff, he said, kicking, but was shocked to see that the gnome receiving it didn't seem to even tickle him. The great beast proceeded to grab her by the face, squeezing it tightly, and then proceeded to hit her and slam her against the ground quite hard, making the heroine feel her bones breaking with each impact her body received and then being thrown against a car, revealing that she was completely destroyed. It was a miracle that she was still alive after such a punishment that the Noma had given her, who by the way was approaching her in a threatening manner. Mirko, please, someone help me, she begged for help, seeing that the only one near her was Mirio, who was fighting against a small group of Nomas. Mirio, please help me. She reached out her hand to where her agency partner was, but he just ignored her and walked away from her, concentrating on fighting those things, abandoning the rabbit heroine to her fate. She began to shed many tears in her only remaining eye, watching her partner abandon her to her fate. But then she remembered a certain former green-haired boy who was always with her no matter what. Mirko, why did I have to abandon him? She asked herself, seeing how the Noma was already in front of her. He would never have abandoned me. Why did I do it? She said to herself, seeing how the creature was ready to crush her head with a strong stomp. Izuku, please save me. Mirko saw how the Noma was about to crush her head with his foot. She was a few centimeters away from doing so when out of nowhere a blur of blue hit her with such force that it ended up shattering her. Mirko closed her eyes the moment she felt the air hit her face from the force of the impact. She began to open them little by little, looking at our protagonist, who had a serious look on her. Mirko gave a big smile and then extended her hand to him, hoping that he would help her, but that illusion vanished with the following words of the blonde. Izuku, wow, you are such a pathetic heroine, Mirko, he said coldly, causing Mirko's smile to disappear. And to think that before I had great respect for you, and now look at you. You are nothing more than a disgrace. That is not even funny, he said, turning his back to proceed to fight the Nomas, leaving a devastated Mirko. Mirko, and to think that I decided to abandon you out of jealousy, she said as she proceeded to shed a bunch of tears. Why did I have to be so immature and stupid? I should have accepted that you decided to stay with Yurozu instead of staying with me, she said as she proceeded to clench her fists tightly. I wanted to be selfish for once in my life, but it seems that I was too much, and now I'm alone again. Forgive me, Izuku, she said, standing there alone, crying, regretting her biggest mistake, not being honest with her heart. With Izuku, he was seeing the destruction that the new Nomas were causing, as well as seeing how several heroes succumbed to these things, so he just sighed and launched into the attack, destroying every Noma that crossed his path, causing the heroes to slowly gain an advantage. But not everything could go well. It would be very, very strange. Izuku had a couple of Nomas held by the neck and proceeded to break their necks and then incinerate them alive, turning them into ashes, but then he received a strong blow from a huge iron ball, knocking him to the ground. He proceeded to get up, seeing that the cause of that blow was Chang, who was accompanied by Choi. Chang, I'm ready for revenge, Homelander, he said, spinning his iron ball. Choi, it's time to end this. Izuku, I couldn't agree with you more, he said as he proceeded to charge Chang with great speed and force, crashing both of them into a building while Choi proceeded to follow them. With Izuku's team, they had arrived at the place, seeing the chaos and destruction that was breaking out, so without further ado, Night Raid and the Jiggers proceeded to divide under the command of their supposed leaders. Night Raid would be in charge of keeping all possible civilians away from the fight, while the Jiggers would keep the Nomas at bay, achieving perfect coordination between them, something that was extremely impossible taking into account the conflicts they had between them, especially Nagenda and his death. Back with Izuku, he was on top of a building under construction, exchanging good blows with Chang, who hit him with his wrecking ball, while Izuku returned each blow with his bare fists, leaving them almost equal in the fight until Chang got hit him harder, sending him flying. Of course, Izuku got up quickly and flew against Chang, causing them both to go through the ground up to 10 floors below. Note the half-built floor is about 100 floors. Chang got hit Izuku hard with her fist. Izuku, good right hook, Chang, he said, wiping the little blood that came out of his lip. My turn, he said, returning the blow, making him step back. Chang took advantage of the distance to stretch out his hand where Choi was standing and then pull it back, and with all his strength throw Choi, who tried to stab Izuku, who moved quickly avoiding that, only to see how Choi jumped from one side to the other looking for a blind spot to take advantage of, while Chang maintained a fight with Izuku, who tried to stay alert to Choi's movements and keep Chang at bay, undoubtedly adding up to a very tough fight for our protagonist, who is going to try to do everything possible to defeat his adversaries and return to his team to help them with the Nomas. Chapter 27. The battle seemed to be lost as the heroes slowly lost ground against the new Nomas. Many heroes were mortally wounded and others died trying to stop them. The Jiggers and Night Raid evened things out a bit against these beasts, but it seemed like it wasn't enough to stop these demon beasts, which seemed to never end. They barely finished off one and two more appeared, and little by little their forces were running out. Akame, damn it, she complained as she proceeded to give several cuts, killing a group of Nomas. It seems that these things are infinite, she said, giving a quick cut, decapitating a Noma that wanted to attack her from behind. Tatsumi, if we continue like this, it's more than certain that we'll end up dead, he said, evading the attacks of the Noma and then piercing his chest with his sword. Is death, where is Izuku? She asked while impaling several Nomas with ice spikes greeting from the ground, until a loud bang was heard and one of the walls of a half-built building that was almost intact was seen completely destroyed. Nagenda, I think by solving her own problems, she said while hitting a Noma's face with her robotic arm, making it explode from the force of impact. Inside the building, you could see that everything was a mess, and in the middle of that mess were Chang and Izuku giving each other some good blows to the point that they drew blood for each blow they gave each other. Chang hit Izuku hard with his iron ball, making him step back, but the former green-haired man recovered, taking a little momentum and responding to that blow with another stronger one, causing Chang to crash into some beams, in which Choi appeared, placing himself in Chang's palm, who proceeded to throw him with all his strength at Izuku. Izuku, not the same trick, he said as he proceeded to grab Choi by the neck. As if it were nothing, that trick is not going to work twice on me, Choi. Choi, but this time we added something else, he said, confusing Izuku. But in response he received a strong blow to the face from a beam that was thrown by Chang himself, taking him out of the building. The blonde recovered from that blow by floating outside the building, only to see the chaos that was being caused around him because of those new Nomas. watching as the heroes retreated when they saw that they were not able to compete with the tremendous strength of those reasonless beasts. "Momo, there are too many of them," she said while covering herself with a shield, avoiding a blow from a Nomu. "We must retreat." "Todoroki, retreat. Everyone go to the city," he ordered, causing most of the heroes to obey. "Izuku, that idiot will only get more innocent people killed. I must go." He didn't finish when he received a strong blow to the head that sent him straight to the ground, raising a large amount of dust in addition to creating a crater. Izuku proceeded to get up little by little as he felt enormous pain throughout his body and especially in his head from such force of that blow he felt, but in that he moved at an enormous speed to avoid being crushed by his new opponent, seeing how he fell where he was before, expanding the crater further, and raising a larger curtain of dust again. The blonde-haired boy stared at the curtain of dust fixedly, waiting for it to dissipate to see who was the person who attacked him, but then he heard a voice that made his skin crawl and that he didn't like at all. "As hard to kill as always, aren't you, Mr. Midoriya?" the voice said in a tone between seriousness and mockery. Izuku, well, so in the end, this disaster turned out to be the work of Rugal, wasn't it, Leopold? He said, looking quite seriously at the aforementioned one who wore a slight mocking smile. Leopold, wow, as perceptive as always, Mr. Midoriya. It's a shame that it took you longer to deduce everything this time. Izuku, you're right, I'm already getting a little slow to understand some things, he said as he proceeded to adjust his left arm. Leopold, and it seems that you don't recover from blows like before, ha ha ha. This is going to be fun, he said as he prepared to attack. Izuku, before I kill you, tell me one thing, he said, cracking his knuckles and causing an air wave. Rugal, where is he? Leopold, and you think we're just going to tell you that? Izuku was confused by that, but out of nowhere he received a strong impact from Chang's metal ball on the side of his face, being sent flying against the sand truck. The former green-haired man tried to get up, but in that Choi jumped on his back, starting to dig his claws into Izuku's body, which he tried to get rid of him. But in that Leopold proceeded to connect a strong kick in the face of our protagonist, sending him against some beams already placed that at the moment of impact he fell on top of Izuku. Our protagonist tried to get up, but in that a foot landed on his back, seeing that it was Leopold. Leopold, I think it's the right time to settle accounts, he said, and then proceeded to hit the blonde relentlessly while laughing. With the others, Night Raid and the Jiggers, along with some heroes, Gran Torino, Aizawa, Ryuko, Empty Lady, Endeavor, Ms. Joke and the Pudsey Cats were trying to keep the enhanced Altagama Nomus at bay, but being outnumbered it was more than obvious that they were going to end up being cornered by these monsters. There was no escape now. The other heroes had decided to retreat from the place, seeing themselves outnumbered and outnumbered. Endeavor, so this is where our lives end. Aizawa, at least we'll die trying to defend the innocent instead of running away like cowards, he said while making his bandages dance. The Nomus launched an attack to finish off once and for all those few heroes that were in front of them, but out of nowhere a purple fireball passed over them, hitting the Nomus, reducing a large number of Nomus to ashes as if it were nothing. Everyone looked at Endeavor. Endeavor, it wasn't me, he said, raising his hands. It was me, someone answered in a deep, muffled tone. Everyone turned to see who it was and more than anything to know if he was a friend or an enemy. The heroes of Japan were a little confused not to recognize the man, but the Jiggers and Night Raid were really shocked to see who it was, since he was considered one of the most dangerous anti-heroes and vigilantes of the United States. Is death. But what the hell are you doing here? Chapter 28. Everyone didn't know what to say after what they saw, being saved by a guy they didn't know except for Night Raid and the Jiggers, and seeing how with a simple attack he was able to finish off a large number of those new Nomus which already had them against the ropes, as well as finishing off many companions and friends. It seemed that hope had abandoned them until the strange man appeared, killing several Nomus at that Nagenda, and his death approached the stranger with a serious look. Nagenda, may I know what you are doing here, Iori Yagami? She said seriously, since they didn't get along very well with him, so to speak. Iori, ha ha ha, they are still resentful about that beating I gave them when they tried to arrest me, he said with a bit of mockery, making the two female leaders of their respective groups angry. It's death. You better talk already, Yagami, or else I'll turn you into a nice ice statue from my garden. Iori, And I remind you that your ice is nothing before my fire, he said, making his death angry. But if they want to know so much, I'll tell you. I received a call from Homelander telling me that there was fun to be had here, so I came. Nagenda, wait a minute, I mean you and Izuku. Is death? Have they always been in communication? Iori, that's right. Is Death/Nagenda. That man is going to have to give a very good explanation. They said only to hear a loud bang and see a large flame of fire shoot into the sky in a half-built building. Iori, wow, it seems he came too, he said seriously as he watched the fire cover the entire building. With Izuku 5 minutes before, the place where the fight between Izuku against Chang, Choi and Leopold was taking place was a mess, while in the middle of the place was Izuku being beaten by Chang and Leopold looking like they were playing tennis, using him as a ball. Since each hit they gave him, they sent him to the other to hit him again until Izuku got tired of that and managed to give Chang a blow that he would connect. Leopold elbowed him in the back, but Izuku responded with another one in the jaw, but then Choi appeared, managing to tear Izuku's back with his claws. The blonde-haired boy tried to respond, but Choi managed to tear one side of him so that Choi would finish with a strong blow with his iron ball, sending him against an iron beam. Leopold, you were a tougher guy than I expected, Homelander, he said while wiping away some blood that fell from his cheek. But it's time to end this, he said, lies putting his foot on the hero's back to prevent him from getting up. Chang raised his iron ball while Choi prepared his claws to finish off the blonde-haired man. Leopold gave the order to execute the blonde, so they both lowered their weapons ready to finish off Izuku, but out of nowhere a flame of fire appeared, shooting in their direction, causing Chang, Choi and Leopold to dodge it while Izuku still remained on the ground to avoid the attack. When the fire stopped appearing, he got up from the ground, seeing how the whole place was red hot, or how the sand had turned into glass. Tell me, how many times will I have to save your ass? Said a voice behind the blonde, who only gave a slight smile. Izuku, as far as I remember I was the one saving your ass, Kyo. Kyo, ha ha ha, I've almost never needed you to save me. Izuku, even worse, I do it this way. Chang, wow, so the final Flammatus came to help you, he said while spinning his ball above him. Leopold, if you're here it means he's here too. He didn't finish when he saw how the part of the ruined city was filled with blue fire, while the roars of pain of the Nomus could be heard. Choi, well, it seems so, he said, watching as the destroyed part of the city continued to submerge in the flames. Izuku, well, who are you asking for? Kyo, you already know what the answer is going to be, he said while grabbing his knuckles. Izuku just gave a smile and then shot out at full speed against Chang, causing both of them to crash into the building while Kyo lit his fists on fire and ran towards Leopold, starting a hand-to-hand combat. With Izuku, he had gone through the wall with Chang's body, which he gave a strong blow to the hero's back and then grabbed him by the leg and slammed it against the ground, and then gave him a strong hit with his iron ball, sending him flying and then jumping and landing on top of him, burying him as much as possible in the ground. With Kyo, he was in a bit of a bind as Leopold was dominating him in combat, showing that he had much more experience and skill in hand-to-hand combat. But due to just one mistake by Leopold, Kyo began to even things out thanks to his fire, while Choi tried to help him as much as he could but only managed to receive second-degree burns. Back with Izuku, he was trying to get up, but Chang just stomped on him over and over and over again, preventing him from getting up off the ground until he decided to crush him with his iron ball, but before it hit, Izuku managed to catch it with one hand while staring at him, showing that he was upset. Izuku, you know I'm fed up with this, Chang, he shouted as he exerted more pressure, starting to crack the iron ball. I'm tired of always repeating the same thing with you, he exclaimed, breaking the ball into 1,000 fragments, and then giving it a hit so hard that it broke his nose. With Kyo, he had given Leopold a strong blow to the stomach, causing him to spit saliva, and then Drake kneed him in the jaw. Leopold tried to counterattack by kicking him in the neck, but Kyo blocked the blow, and then grabbed his leg and threw him against a wall. Both were going to throw themselves at each other again, but then another wall of the building was destroyed, letting Chang through, who was being beaten by Izuku fiercely and mercilessly, showing that he was very angry. Izuku, you know that when I'm done with you, Rugal will be next, he exclaimed while increasing the strength of his blows. So do me a favor, he said, giving him another 2 hits with more strength to save him a space in hell. After saying that, he hit with much more force, deforming Chang's face as well as sending him flying against a truck, destroying it completely. Izuku stood in front of him, and then grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up as if it were nothing while he prepared to rip out his heart to end this. Izuku, see you never, Chang, he said, ready to kill him. But before he could do anything, an explosion of energy was present, causing Izuku to release Chang only to then receive a strong blow that sent him against Kyo, causing them both to crash into an excavator. They both looked up, seeing that the cause of that was none other than Rugal. Izuku, wow, so the final boss decided to appear early, he said, getting up from the ground a little annoyed. Rugal, bring me Choi and Chang. Leopold, he said seriously. Leopold only did what Rugal asked him to, carrying Choi like a sack of potatoes while he held Chang by the arm, dragging him without caring about leaving a trail of blood until he was next to Rugal. Rugal, I'll tell you something, Homelander. I'd love to settle a few pending matters with you, he said, activating something on his wrist, opening a portal behind them, but I'm afraid that it was later. Izuku, don't even think they'll escape, he said, shooting towards them. But before he could reach them to launch the first blow, Rugal and his subordinates disappeared, causing Izuku to pass by. The blonde stopped looking where Rugal and his subordinates were before, only to then take a deep breath, causing Kyo to cover his ears. With the heroes, they were almost equal with the Nomus thanks to Iori, who used his flames to burn the beasts alive. But then something happened that they never imagined would happen. Curse. Izuku's sonic scream was heard, which made the heroes cover their ears in pain, as well as the Nomus, as it broke the windows of the buildings and raised a large amount of dust. Without a doubt a small demonstration of Izuku's fury, something that was fearsome to anyone who dared to anger him. Chapter 29. The war against the Nomus was over. The heroes had managed to emerge victorious, but at what cost? Many heroes as well as civilians died during the combat. Very few heroes had survived, and several of them were in critical condition or worse still, at risk of death. The few heroes who were still standing and almost intact helped in the search for civilians: Aizawa, Torino, Endeavor, Ryuko, Iori, Jiger's, Night Raid, while others were with the press, giving their opinions. Iori, instead of wasting time, they should come help, he said, while melting some rocks to free some civilians trapped in a large pile of rubble. Endeavor, in the end, Stain had everything over his actions, he said, annoyed, remembering the heroes killer. Negenda, who is that Stain? It's Death. I understand that he was a guy who dedicated himself to killing false heroes, as he called himself, she said as she proceeded to contain the fire with her ice. Aizawa, since Midoriya left, he managed to get out of prison and has remained hidden ever since. Torino, the only thing he said before disappearing was that only Izuku would be the only one to put him back behind bars after the glorious battle they would have when they met again for their rematch, he said, helping his fellow heroes. But then they feel like a taste of air blowing lightly to see that Izuku aka Homelander had arrived at the area where the war against the Nomus used to be, and he didn't look very happy, let's say, in addition to having with Kyo, who stared at Iori, who stared back at him. Izuku, as I see it, things got quite complicated, he said, proceeding to descend until touching the ground, and I also see that many lost their lives, he said, seeing the lifeless bodies of several heroes and civilians all over the place. Endeavor, at least their deaths were not in vain, he said, looking at the civilians who managed to survive. Mirio, their deaths weren't in vain, you say? He said, appearing with Nijire, Tamaki, and other heroes. Look around you, Endeavor, all this chaos and destruction. Shoto, besides, we didn't manage to end the Villain League as it should have been. Tamaki, and you say that his death was not in vain? Homelander, at least they died trying to save these people when you guys told them. Don't think I haven't seen how they turned their backs on both civilians and wounded comrades in order to keep fighting. Nijire, but Midoriya-san, we were in combat and… Homelander, for being a former apprentice of Ryuko, it's clear that you didn't learn anything from her. Civilians are the most important in these types of cases, but it makes sense since someone as useless and childish as you will never understand it, he said, making the blue-haired girl cry. Of course Mirio didn't like that at all and tried to face the blonde-haired boy and stressed the deal, since Izuku with a quick movement grabbed him by the face and slammed him back against the ground while putting more force into his grip, making the new bearer of One for All moan in pain because of that. Izuku, and you are not left out of this, Mirio, since I saw how Mirko was abandoned to her fate. while trying to make himself the hero fighting with those things even knowing that she could die, he said, releasing Mirio so that he could get up, but I see that that was never an impediment for you, false hero. After saying that, he proceeded to turn his back on Mirio, which was a mistake since like a coward he used one for all, hitting Izuku from behind, sending him flying a couple of meters, and really that didn't please the blonde at all, who stared at the other blonde with a face of, "You're worth it, Hitch." Izuku, okay, he said seriously as he slowly got up. Mirio stood there watching him, but then the blonde-haired American turned around quickly and shot his laser beam at him, causing him to fly against a car. Mirio got up quickly and concentrated a little more of the power of one for all to proceed to return the blow, but he barely managed to move him. Instead, Izuku hit him in the face, returning him to his place, but Mirio increased the power of one for all further, launching himself against him, managing to ram him, taking him far away until he crashed into a building. All of this was seen by the heroes and civilians who were still there, saw this conflict, and not only that, but it was also being broadcast. Everyone saw how red flashes were produced in the building, as well as strong impact waves that knocked down every part of the building until Mirio was seen being thrown out of it, hitting the ground in front of them, and then seeing Izuku give the Japanese blonde-haired boy a hard blow. But he quickly recovered by headbutting him, but Izuku returned it with more force, causing him to throw nets backwards. "Izuku, you're disappointing me, Mirio," he said with noticeable disappointment. "Mirio, shut up," he claimed, shooting out at him, but the blonde-haired American grabbed him by the neck and slammed him into the ground before lifting him up and letting him fall headfirst to finish with a kick to the abdomen, causing him to crash into the van of one of the television stations, destroying it. Mirio was going to continue fighting, but Izuku put his foot on his head, preventing that. "Izuku, accept it, Mirio. You will never be able to beat me," he said, looking at him seriously. "You are simply very weak. You do not have the guts to finish me off. But I do have the guts to finish you off and anyone who dares to disturb the peace. Mirio, you fight for peace when in reality you fight for yourself, you bucking murderer." "Izuku, it's true I'm a murderer, but I only kill those who are capable of taking more innocent lives," he said seriously, removing his foot from him. "I'm not a god to judge, but unlike people like you, I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty to save people, and that's what makes me better than you." After saying that, he proceeded to retreat while leaving behind a very badly wounded Mirio, who clenched his fists in helplessness since he had just been humiliated again by the former green-haired man, and all on a global level, proving that he is and always will be the best and the true symbol of peace.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.